Imagine this. You've just watched the most powerful empire on earth collapse before your eyes, the sea itself split to let you through, then swallowed your enemies whole. Freedom is finally yours. You think the hard part is over. You're wrong. The Red Sea had closed behind them like a mighty gate, swallowing Pharaoh and his elite army in a single final breath. It was the grand finale of one chapter and the ominous opening of another. For over 400 years they had been chained not just in body but in mind and soul under the shadow of Egypt's idols and customs, not forgetting their delicacies. Those pagan rhythms had seeped into their bones, quietly eroding the foundation of who they were meant to be. Now, God had freed them from the land. But more than a physical separation, a lot of heart work was needed to free them from its grip on their hearts. That would take more than a miracle. It would take a journey and a transformation.
Hi dear, it's Q3E7 and today we explore the topic, the bread and water of life. You're ready? Let's get into it. Today, I'll leave a share in the comment section. What key object lessons ministered to you? Let's do this.
Usually when God sets out to shape character, He rarely does it in comfort. One of the ways God grooms us as we navigate through this process of character development and transformation is by allowing us to be in uncomfortable situations where the very virtues He wants to grow are the ones being tested. Their first test, the first real chance to grow, came not years later, but exactly 3 days after the roar of the Red Sea had faded into silence. And trust me, it was about to hit them hard.
3 days, no water. The desert sun beating down, lips cracked, tongues dry, children crying, tempers short. And then an oasis appears in the distance. That must have felt really good. Water at last.
Yeah, relief surges until the first sip. Bitter, undrinkable. Exodus 15:22-27 records it this way. Can you please read?
Sure, it reads, Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And they came to Marah. They could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. Enriched, the people grumbled at Moses, saying, What shall we drink? Then he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. Then he made for them a statute and regulation, and there he tested them. And he said, If you will give earnest heed to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in His sight, and give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters.
This was more than a thirst crisis. It was a test, a moment where God turned bitterness into sweetness, not just in the water, but as a lesson for the heart. The water at Marah had been sweetened, thirst was quenched, but if you listened closely, you could still hear something bitter. Not in the water, but in the people. And that lesson, it was just getting started.
The water at Marah was sweet now, but the people, still bitter?
Absolutely. Hold that thought. We'll get back to them. For now, here are a few takeaways from this text. 1. Grace and favor of God do not always abdicate the concept of process. Freedom from Egypt was instant, but freedom from Egypt's mindset would take time. Spiritual growth doesn't come with shortcuts. And here's the truth. Our cooperation determines how quickly we imbibe the lessons for the season and graduate to the next. This is what I have learned. If you resist the lesson for the season, you'll find yourself retaking the same test and repeating the class. Your choice. 2. Have you ever had to walk in a desert? It's not fun. To do so for the first 3 days, adults and children, without complaining, that is commendable. The challenge is usually just outside the limits of our tolerance. Even for the strongest among us, there comes a time when endurance is maxed out. At those extreme moments, how you react is usually a true reflection of where you truly are in your walk with God. In this scenario, while one group, the people, resorted to grumbling and murmuring, the other, Moses, was consulting the Lord in prayers. Same experience, different mindset and approach, different outcomes. The same principle applies today. In paraphrase, Pastor Elvis McGoy puts it simply, if you can complain about it, you can definitely pray about it.
One man stands before bitter waters, the cries of a desperate nation at his back. He prays and God answers. Not with a well, not with rain from heaven, but with a tree? Really?
That is correct. Verses 25 reads, Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. He threw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. I do not know of any laws in chemistry or biology that explains the logic of a tree or log of wood being a filter or purifier. Even if there is, it was most definitely not invented then. Which brings us to takeaway number 3. It was not so much the tree, but the Lord who made the water sweet and drinkable. The miracle was never in the tree. It was in the one who pointed it out. But the point wasn't just to fix the water.
God was teaching them. 1. Patience. If he could part the Red Sea, surely he could quench their thirst. The delay was not neglect, it was training. 2. God often chooses to work with his people, not just for them.
That is so true. Opportunities for character growth are rarely random. They fill a need in the present and prepare us for the future. And if we resist the lesson, it will be unfair to us to advance because we will be unprepared for the challenges of the new season. So the test will come again and again, sometimes in a different form, but with the same question.
Which is exactly what happened next, right?
That is correct. Herein lies one of the secrets of repeating cycles. For Israel, that question was about to show up again, this time in a new wilderness, with a new need and a new opportunity to grow or grumble.
So, what happened next?
Well, after they blew their first post-Red Sea learning opportunity at the waters of Marah, they will get another chance. The journey continued this time from Elim to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, exactly 1 month after leaving Egypt, the familiar murmur rose once again.
Exodus 16:2-3 reads, The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The sons of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger.
The things these people complained about were very legitimate. First, it was water, and now food. These are necessities. The problem was not in the legitimacy of the reasons behind their complaints, but in how they approached the problems, how they responded when the need arose. From the moment they left Egypt, one of the core lessons the Lord had been trying to teach them, and an extension us today, is, as you navigate through life, you will encounter challenges, some of them very legitimate, and so pressing they feel unbearable. I need you to trust me enough to talk them over with me rather than defaulting to murmurings and complaints. But for Israel, that default was hard to break. At the first sign of trouble, the chorus was the same: complain, grumble, blame Moses, question God, wish for Egypt. Every grumble was a reminder of why God didn't lead them on the shortcut to the Promised Land. They were free from Egypt's chains, but still bound by Egypt's mindset. Yet again, they blew it.
So what did God do?
Interestingly, for the second time now in row, despite their murmurings and complaints, God always came to the rescue, addressing the need. This time, the Lord used this season as a teaching opportunity. He met their immediate need for food through his daily provision of quail in the evening and manna in the morning. Exodus 16:12 and 13. His provision, the manna, it could not be preserved overnight except for the Sabbath. They had had to learn and practice daily dependence on God. In this model, the Lord also made a distinction between the seventh-day Sabbath and every other day. His provision of manna was twice as much on the sixth day, and only on this day could the manna self-preserve till the seventh day without being infested by worms. And just in case you think this is coincidence, on the seventh day not a single quail or manna fell. This was the routine for 40 years.
This is not a coincidence. Coincidences do not produce orderliness. This had to be intentional. Think about it. If God, who commands the universe, is this precise about timing, patterns, and rest, it must matter to him. And if it matters to him, it should matter to us. In this, God was clearly making a distinction between the Sabbath and every other day.
But the journey wasn't over. Ahead lay another test, one they'd faced before. Same need, same God. But would they finally pass the lesson? I guess we'll find out.
Yes, we will. The next lap of the journey continued from the wilderness of sin to Rephidim, where they camped. And yet again, same test pops. There is a legitimate need, no water, the most essential commodity in the desert. This would be the second time running dry, and if ever there was a chance to show growth, this was it. But the camp was a mixed multitude, and old habits die hard. Think about it. At the Red Sea, they face Pharaoh's army. At Marah, the bitter waters. In the wilderness of sin, empty stomachs. And now, at Rephidim, they stood before another water crisis.
In each of these occasions, there was a legitimate need, and each time they watched Moses take it to the Lord in prayers, and each time the Lord proffered a solution to their need. You would think anyone watching could have caught this recipe or pattern. Trouble, prayer, provision. But not really. Instead, their default response remained the same, a longing for Egypt, the comfort of the feminine, even if it was bondage.
And so, at Rephidim, the real question wasn't just, will there be water? It was, will they finally acknowledge the one who had always provided it?
Their attachment to Egypt wasn't just about comfort, it was about certainty. Egypt was miserable, yes, but it was predictable. The wilderness, on the other hand, was filled with unknowns. Even though God was leading them towards something infinitely better, their hearts kept turning back to what was familiar. So, in every crisis, the only point of comparison they had was Egypt.
Exodus 17:3 reads, "The people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, 'Why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?'" Exact same line again. The problem here is, though they were physically out of Egypt, their hearts, thoughts, and appetites were still very much in Egypt. They were present in body but distant in heart, so disconnected that they couldn't even recognize the tangible signs of God's presence among them, practically incapable of engaging with God. And this disconnect between outward religion and inward reality is not just their story, it's ours too, which is why the next scene hits closer to home than we might expect.
Can you relate? Looking like you're worshiping and still miles from God. All dressed, Bible in hand, voice ready to sing, seated in church, maybe even the front pews, yet so distant and disconnected that we incapable of engaging with God, so that worship sessions, personal and corporate over time, transitions to mere thoughtless rituals. physically in church, yet still miles away from God at heart. Sometimes the greatest distance is not between the pew and the pulpit, but between the head and the heart. This was the problem of this group. They stood in the very presence of God and His miracles, yet their hearts were somewhere else, Egypt. Maybe, just maybe, the problem is not the preacher, the choir, or the cold atmosphere, but a disconnection of heart and spirit from God long before the service began. Remember this. Worship, whether personal or corporate, can easily slip into mere ritual and thoughtless routines when our spirits are disengaged. Now you know where to look, not out there, but inwards. Maybe it's time you did something about it.
Moving on. Interestingly, in each of these occasions, despite their rebellion and show of ingratitude, the Lord always addressed the need regardless of how it was presented. This time, the Lord Himself became a source of water to satisfy their need. He could have commanded water to pop from the rocks. He had 1,000 options and more to address this need, but He opted to be the source Himself. The Lord desired to be this intimately involved with them, but they were too distant to notice. Beyond the miracle of provision, of quail, manna, and water, was the presence of the Lord Himself, but they seemed more interested in what He provided that met their needs than they were in meeting Him who provided. Can you relate? What draws you more to God? Helm things around Him or His presence? Is it in meeting your pressing needs or getting to know Him, or better still, both? This calls for an honest self-appraisal, and here are some simple but diagnostic test questions for your reference. 1. If God does not address that pressing legitimate need you have been waiting on Him for, will you still serve Him faithfully? 2. Heaven and hell were off the table. Would we still serve Him faithfully? The answers to these questions reveal more about the state of our hearts than we might care to admit. Hopefully, we can do the needful while we still can.
Let's get back to the lesson. You will recall when all of this started and God called Moses, he was still in Midian. In response, Moses left everything, took his family, and left for Egypt. That was the last we heard of Moses' family. What we did not know was that while Moses was answering God's call and all that came with it, Zipporah was keeping it together in the home front so that he could be the leader that God called him to be. In the last couple of weeks, while the spotlight has been on Moses, Pharaoh, and the Hebrews, not so much has been said about this superwoman, Zipporah, Moses' wife.
It is important to note that Moses was able to fully focus and do what he was called to do, mostly because his home front was taken care of courtesy of Zipporah, and she did her thing quietly and diligently, not seeking attention or validation.
Some heroes never stand on a stage. They don't lead armies, split seas, or call down plagues, yet without them, those who do could never fulfill their calling. Zipporah was one of them.
That is correct. After months apart, a family reunion unfolds in the middle of the desert. But this wasn't just hugs and catching up. It was a moment that would echo faith across nations. While Israel camped, Jethro, also known as Reuel, the prince of Midian and Moses' father-in-law, arrived, bringing Zipporah and Moses' sons back to him. You can imagine the scene: warm embraces, tears of relief, voices overlapping as they shared all that had happened. Moses recounted God's mighty deliverance from Pharaoh, the plagues, the Red Sea, and Jethro listened intently. He was so touched and his faith in God reaffirmed that he declared, "Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people." Exodus chapter 18, verses 10 and 11.
This right here is a perfect example of how God's work among his people was to be a witness to the world of who the true God is and of what he can do for his people. But the next day, Jethro would witness something that had nothing to do with miracles and everything to do with leadership gaps.
Oh no, what happened?
The day after the reunion, Jethro noticed something unusual. A sea of people crowding around Moses from morning till evening. What looked like dedication was actually exhaustion waiting to happen. Sincere, but not effective. Moses was personally handling every dispute, every question, every case. From dawn till dusk, the people queued, waiting for their turn. He was sincere, committed, but overwhelmed. Spiritually, he was strong. Administratively, he was stretched thin. As spiritual and godly as he was, administratively he was deficient, but open to learn.
That seems like a lot.
It was. Jethro didn't embarrass him publicly. Instead, he pulled him aside, I think, and offered counsel that was both practical and wise. He goes, appoint capable, God-fearing leaders over groups of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Them handle the smaller matters, while Moses focused on the most difficult cases. We give the people faster resolutions and keep Moses from burning out. Pay close attention to Jethro's protocol of correction. Does not undermine the man for his administrative flaws, but counsels him, I believe, in private.
To his credit, Moses wasn't too proud to listen. He recognized good sense, no matter who it came from, and he acted on it. For Moses, if it made perfect sense, then it was the right thing to do, regardless of whose opinion it is. And from this moment, two powerful lessons emerge. One about unseen pillars of ministry, and another about being teachable, no matter your title.
Here are a few takeaways from this account. We will take turns. I will start. 1. Zipporah may not have been in the limelight, but her fidelity and trusted hands were the reason Moses could fully focus on his calling. A lot of times the spotlight is on the structure and not the pillars that support them. Many ministries are standing today because of such unseen pillars, spouses, family members, and supporters who bear the weight in silence. To every quiet, behind-the-scenes hero, always scrutinized yet never complaining, and sparingly ever acknowledged, heaven sees you. Your sacrifices matter. Your fingerprints are on every victory, even if your name is never mentioned here. Remember this.
But spiritual and godly as our leaders are, they do not have it all together. They may excel in preaching yet struggle in administration, be gifted spiritually but inexperienced in other areas, maybe tech. That doesn't make them less anointed, it makes them human. When you see a gap and you can help, step in. Don't tear them down, build with them. After all, this is our Father's work. They're just His employees.
3. A title can open doors, but it can also close your ears. The real test of leadership isn't how much authority you hold. It's how teachable you remain. Being entrusted with authority in God's work doesn't mean your way is always the best way. Please be open and teachable. Moses showed us that true leadership is willing to listen, weigh new ideas, and act when they make sense, no matter where they come from. When next these ideas pop, can you please kindly consider and give it a thought?
With respect to Jethro's counsel on structure, in extension, the same principle applies to the church today. The church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. It is not solely the pastor's or the leader's responsibility. It belongs to every believer. Some are called to lead groups of tens, fifties, hundreds, or thousands. Others are called to serve within them. But all hands must be on deck. You're either a missionary or a mission field. Make up your mind.
Some stories are meant to inspire. Others are meant to warn. Israel's wilderness journey was meant to do both, and now the lessons are in our hands. As we move deeper into Exodus, We'll encounter account after account, stories rich with principles for walking with God, and cautionary tales showing what happens when we don't. Exodus, the advantage we have is hindsight. We know how their story unfolds. The hope is that we'll avoid their mistakes and embrace their victories. The Apostle Paul put it best, "Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come." 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. These aren't just ancient events. They're guideposts for today, for us, right now. The question is, will we learn from their journey before we repeat it?
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. But listen, don't blink, because next week on Q3E7, Covenant at Sinai, the journey continues. You don't want to miss it. Until then, stay humble, stay teachable, and as always, I remain your Sabbath School Doodle doodling out. Let's keep making it make sense, one study at a time.
If this message stirred even a whisper in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Mash that like, and send us a comment. Share this with someone whose faith could use a nudge. And hey, if you haven't yet made that life-altering decision to follow Christ, you still can, but don't wait, because the clock is ticking and grace is calling. I'll catch you next week, God willing. Until then, never forget, we weren't born just to survive and pay bills. We're still auditioning to take over in heaven. No retreat, no surrender.